This is We the Sales Engineers podcast, show 288.
Welcome to We the SEs podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramzi Majaba.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back to another episode. I am your host, Ramzi Majaba, and I have the great pleasure of having a repeat guest today on the show. She goes by the name of Aileen McNabb, an SE coach out of Vancouver, somewhere in Canada, Western Canada. I hope I didn't. Anyways, she's based out of Canada, and she likes horses. She's been on the show before, show 155. So if you're curious to hear about her story, you should go and check that out there. Today's conversation was similar and different at the same time, in the sense that we did discuss some of the things. We brought up some of the things that we discussed last time, which I think has been over a year and a half now, maybe more. But she is releasing a book, or she released a book called The 3 Secrets of Sales Engineer Success. Tech isn't enough. I love the fact that she said tech isn't enough. I tell her that in the show itself. There's a lot of information shared today about looking internally, right? When we talk about sales engineering, we talk about like, hey, working with customers and all that. But she's a coach and she helps people who are struggling. And a lot of what we talked about is to look internally, see what we have, what's going on internally before we start dealing with people. And which is counterintuitive, because our job is dealing with people. Maybe it's not counterintuitive. It is counterintuitive to me. But maybe it's obvious for her and many people. So I learned a lot in this show, as you can tell. And I learned a lot about myself. There are things that I knew about myself that she brought to the forefront, and now they're obvious. And there are things that I didn't think about before, and she brought them out. And it's nice to talk to someone else. So she's into the behavioral, like DISC and all that. I'll leave a picture of the behavioral, I guess, the personality types that she talks about. And I always think of myself as to the right, as a driver. And she's talking about me being to the left, and maybe, and it sounds like the way she sees me is more accurate than the way I see myself. So it's interesting from that aspect. I'm going to stop rambling right now. Let's just jump into the show. You can hear Aileen talk instead of me. And I think that'll be more useful for you right now. Let's jump into the show. Miss McNabb, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be back.
Well, it's nice to have you back. I said Miss McNabb. I'm not sure if that's the right way to address you. Was that correct?
It's a fine way to address me. Yes.
Awesome. All right. How are you doing, Aileen?
Not bad. Not bad at all.
So you've been on the show.
Lots of changes in my life. I've moved. I'm renovating a house. It's busy.
Okay. And working a full-time, well, I guess, owning a full-time job, owning a business, which is much harder than working a full-time job. How's that been going?
Yeah. It's going great.
Okay, good.
It's going great because I absolutely love the variety of people that I work with when I coach. They're all over the world. They're all in pre-sales, but they're all interesting in their own way. So it's fun.
That's pretty good. So yeah, you said they're all over the world and they're all interesting. Is there something like specifically that draws you to specific people in terms of like you find interesting, or is it just in general people are interesting?
I think it's just in general, and also probably the reason I wrote the book I just wrote, because the reason they come to me, or the things we end up talking about, tend to be things that I'm interested in, which are, what are the things that make you happy at work? Not just how do you do the next best demo.
Well, isn't that what makes us happy at work?
No.
No. Well, surprise.
No. It's part of it. Yeah, it's part of it. But no, I don't think it's doing a good demo alone will not make you happy. Although, when I was doing good demos, certainly it's a lot of fun, isn't it?
It is, if you get the responses you're hoping for.
Oh yeah. Depending on the audience. True.
So we can dig deep into that in a second if you like. But you mentioned the book you just wrote.
That's right.
What is the name of the book, and where can people find it?
It's called 3 Secrets of Sales Engineering Success. The subtitle is Tech Isn't Enough. And you can get it on Amazon. So this is my first time publishing, so I just stayed with Amazon. Everybody seems to have access to that.
Is it self-published?
Yes.
You have to do all the work. Ooh.
Well, yeah, the learning curve of doing that took a little while.
You're a sales engineer. You're used to learning, I guess.
Yeah, that's true.
And a business owner and all that stuff. What made you write that book?
I wrote the book because, well, 2 reasons. I bet you it was like my first or second coaching client said, "Oh, do you have a book?" And I was sort of thinking, gee, maybe I'm supposed to have a book. But the reason I wrote this one is because no matter what the reason that people come to me or are sent to me, sometimes they're sent for coaching by their managers, it always boils down to 3 basic things that help them deal with all the other things. So those are the 3 topics that I'm covering. But, you know, somebody, as you could be coming to me because, like one guy came to me because he couldn't do a short demo, had to show every single thing that is in the product, could not function without doing that. You know, that's pretty basic demo stuff, but still we got into his strengths and bouncing back. I've had people come to me because, oh my goodness, I cannot do a customer show. Oh yeah, you can if you stop your mind from churning. And so no matter, and I had a lot of people come to me for, I'm going to do an interview demo.
Okay.
And certainly we got down to the nitty-gritty of how do you open, how do you close, all the stuff in between. But to keep their minds from churning, we went through some of the things that I wrote about. So that long answer is because I just found that no matter what people were coming to me for around pre-sales, these underlying factors helped them achieve the other things.
Yeah, and these are the 3 secrets that you mentioned.
They are 3 secrets. Somebody made the point they aren't secrets. I've heard of these before. I think of them as secrets because they certainly seem like secrets. It seems to me that they're basics, but they get ignored. So
yeah,
I deal with them as if it's a secret.
It's like when you hide something in plain sight. Right?
Yeah.
I feel like I don't think there are any secrets left.
No, not very many, that's for sure.
But people ignore what's staring them in the face. And when you tell them, like, hey, I'm telling you a secret, this is it. They're like, oh yeah, that's true.
You make a good point. Yeah.
So, I've been interested in writing a book myself for a while.
Okay.
So I'm curious, how long did it take you to actually, from the day you decided to write the book?
Oh my God. It probably took me 2 years, but I bet you could do it in about 3 months.
And what, how so? Like, what would be the process of writing a book?
So the process,
like, how would you do it again?
If you know what you're going to write about. Step 1 is to do that. And while you're doing that, if you haven't already published, while you're writing the book, learn about how to publish. Okay. I sort of did it in sequence. So the book is sitting there ready, and then I had another learning curve going on. So I would say you don't have to. And I think I actually would take online seminars. I took a course, where needed. You write an outline, like a true honest-to-goodness outline, and then you flesh it out from there. And if you work on that, say, every morning or every evening, whatever your time is, you'll get this done in 3 months, including the publishing.
So, okay. So basically write
I have 2 more books planned. So let's see if there's any truth in what I just said. We'll check in 3 months.
Okay. Oof. Can I have a sneak peek about what are they about? Not necessarily the title, or what are the topics?
Well, they're going to be 2 small, 2 related books. What does sales want from pre-sales, and should they want it?
Yeah.
And what does pre-sales want from sales?
Okay. I like it.
And sometimes they aren't the same,
Yeah, I noticed that. So I don't know if you're aware, I've been in sales for the last 2 years now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of see both ends of the spectrum, and I would love to see what you wrote on those books. I'm sure we'd agree on many of them.
Well, my right now my planned format is that I'm going to interview salespeople and do it in the form of their stories. So I may end up trying to ask you to be interviewed because I love people who have done sales and pre-sales and see how the perspective changes.
Yeah, you know where to find me.
All righty.
And then I would have you on the podcast again and talk about how great I was in your book. But, hey, that's a different story. All right. So for this book, took a couple of years to write because you had to do things in sequence.
And I dropped it a lot. I stepped away from it a lot. So, but if you're focused, 3 months, I think.
Yeah, that's my problem. It's like I start with it and then life happens. You do something else, and then you're like, oh, I remember that book that you were writing. Okay, let's go back to where was I? Everything you know what? Crap.
We could have a conversation outside of a podcast, and I can give you all of the false steps that I took and how you can avoid them.
Did you, since you started this and like dropped it, when you went back, did you ever feel like, oh, what I wrote is crap and just wanted to erase everything and restart?
Yeah, sometimes I didn't though, because when you do take a course on how to do any of these things, they say don't do that. And so I kept reminding myself that done is better than perfect a lot of the time.
Ooh, that's the same for demos most of the time.
Yes. But yeah, when you're prepping a demo, get yourself a workaround, boys. It's time to be done.
Done's better than
now it helped. I mean, so if you really know what you want to write about, it's easier not to keep second guessing yourself, because I knew I wanted to write about these 3 things. I just second guessed how I wanted to say it sometimes.
Okay. So these 3 things, we've been teasing them for quite a bit.
Yeah.
Would you mind just going over them briefly, like introducing the ideas, and then we can
Not
dig
at
deeper.
all. So, got my book?
It was blurry for a second. We didn't see the cover. Yeah.
Do you want to see it?
I do. It gets blurry whenever. It's okay.
So the 3 sections, I start with an opening, by the way, that I want to talk about before we go too much further. But the 3 key sections are the people in sales engineering. I've always called it pre-sales, but the world seems to be going to sales engineering. So sometimes I flip back and forth. So it's the people in sales engineering. Then it is strengths. This is the one that I think is most overlooked. And then the 3rd section is resilience, because no matter how good you get at working with your strengths, no matter how good you get at working with people, sometimes things go sideways and you need to bounce back quickly. So those are the 3 main sections.
When you said section 2 was strength, I thought immediately section 3 would be weakness, but
no.
Okay.
And one of my coaching designations is in positive coaching. So I tend to look at it from the positive point of view, which is that we have strong, higher and lesser strengths, but we don't have to think of them as weaknesses. So do you want to talk about strengths for a few minutes?
Yeah, let's do it.
Or do you want them? Yep. So what I follow, there are all kinds of models for strengths. And I follow the VIA character strengths model. It was put together by a guy at University of Pennsylvania who is considered the father of positive psychology. It's relatively easy to use, and you can get your strengths online free. There are lots of others. It's not free. It's not as easy to understand. So that's what I follow. So they say there are 24 main strengths. So what I have all my coaching clients do is they take a quiz to find out what their upper and lower strengths are. Okay. And then we talk a little bit about how to use them, what difference does it make if you use them. And I think this is the hardest thing for people to get their minds around, because I don't think we think about it very often. Like if we had to stop and think, what are your top 5 strengths? We very seldom can really name them. And so it takes a little while to get people used to using them. And what happens over the course of a coaching process, and it's at least 6 sessions, so I see them at least 6 times. Most people renew. They'll be talking away, and I will pull up their strengths profile and say to them, look at this. And I'll tell you, what's interesting is sometimes or often, the biggest problem is not that people aren't using their strengths or that they aren't fixing a weakness. It's that they are overusing a strength. It's too much of a good thing.
Okay. Okay. I would need some more. I'm behind the idea that if you're strong at something and weak at something else, it might be a good idea to just lean on your strengths instead of bringing up
Yes.
your weakness. When does it become too much of a good thing?
Well, I can give you some examples of it.
Yeah, please.
Actually, one of the very first stories I tell in the book is about, he was one of my favorite coaching clients because he got it so fast. So he was one where his manager sent him to see me because he was constantly shooting himself in the foot by saying things that weren't appropriate, that annoyed other people. He had a big, one of our, kickoffs, whole company there, and he kind of shot off his mouth, they said, and we just can't make him stop it. So I spoke to him, and within a very short period of time, I thought that he was overusing bravery.
Okay.
You have to be brave to speak the truth to power. You have to be wise to speak it well at the right time. So we talked to him about that, and I told him it's a great thing. And he also was pretty low on self-control. And so he did need to boost that one. Like, you don't have to say everything that goes across your mind does not have to come out right now. But what I talked to him about I was saying, you would never be a victim of groupthink. Groupthink was the reason the Challenger failed and they had that big explosion. And groupthink is when there is one charismatic or powerful person in the group and nobody wants to counter them.
Right.
Well, this guy, Rob, he would counter anybody. And the thing that he got in trouble for, he had good reason for thinking that they shouldn't be doing it. That's what he was doing. But, a big company meeting, excuse me, I think you're all wrong. He was too brave and not taking enough caution. He wasn't cautious enough. Okay. We talked about that. You know what I think helps? I think it helps when you're being told it's not that you're weak, it's that you're being too strong in one area. So that was bravery. Here's one that happens all the time. People will say, well, I'm thinking about leaving the company, so I feel it's only right that I tell my manager I'm thinking about it. And I say, so, if they're in the back room thinking about laying you off, do you think they're going to give you a heads up? Probably not.
No.
But besides that, there is a time when you want to let them know, or there will be circumstances when you want to let them know. And not that long ago, somebody was saying this to me, and while he was talking, I pulled up his strengths profile and I said, as I thought, fairness is in your top 3. He was overusing fairness. That will make him a great person. Do you know where it also isn't good? Is when you're trying to make a sale and you say, well, I don't want to push them too hard. I want to be fair to the buyer, which of course we want to be, but I don't want them to get in trouble. I don't want them to have a hard time. I want to be fair to them. And they're just overusing fairness. You take all of your strengths and use them optimally. So overusing fairness is common. Overusing bravery is common.
It's funny you say that because I've never heard of someone doing that. Right. And then someone messaged me, is like, hey, I want to go into sales. I'm going to tell my boss tomorrow.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell my boss today, like in a couple hours. And by the time I saw the message, I'm like, no, wait, don't do that. Secure a job. See if there's.
Yes.
And they had already told them. And within hours, they said, oh, my boss is looking for a replacement now. Because
of course
he didn't move. Like, there was no opening. There's a difference between like, hey, I show an interest, like, hey, I'm thinking about maybe in the future I'd like to try sales, versus I want to move into sales now. Like, one is asking for help for the future, and one's saying like, hey, I want to move now, and bam.
Yeah.
And I never thought of it, and now you're basically like, the secret is out in the open.
Yes.
So okay.
Yeah, and there are a number of them. I myself have a very strong love of learning. That is one of the character strengths. I love the process of learning. I almost missed signing on because I was learning how to do something new on a video. I don't need to know that. But if I get stressed, like say I was prepping a demo in the olden days when I did, if I was getting stressed about being able to do it, I might discover that I just spent an hour and a half learning how to use a new PowerPoint technique. Really? Because my comfort zone is the learning process. I was overusing my strength, love of learning.
Nice. All right. So you just mentioned, strength is love of learning, and you always ask your clients what are or you find out their top 5 strengths.
Yeah.
If you were to list yours, do you know what they are, and what would they be?
They would be wisdom, love of learning, perspective, and I forget what I focus on the top 3. I'll have to look them up. But what I love about them is I sincerely did this test several times. Those are great things for coaching. So what happened was, I believe I followed my strengths and ended up in something that I really enjoyed, the hands-on sales engineering as well. And I absolutely love the coaching, and it totally matches my top strengths. So I find it hard to get people to focus on strengths, maybe because it's just something that we don't do very often. And you really need to either talk to somebody or read about it a little bit to understand it. But that's the other part of it, is if you can go with your strengths, you're going to be a happier person. And if a pre-sales manager could let the people doing demos, or say the sales team, let the people doing demos go with their strengths, the demos won't all be the same. They'll all be good.
Well, I mean, it's not just the demos. I get, because I've done both. A lot of salespeople come to me and tell me like, this SE is not doing what I want them to do.
Yeah.
And then we have a conversation about it, and we find out that this SE strength is the total opposite of what you're asking them to do. Like, when we discuss sales engineering, we think, hey, they help with the pre-sales, they do help us with the discovery and all that.
Yeah.
But a lot of SEs, especially in the world that I work in, are hired for their technical skills and their support skills. So they're hired for that, but they're expected to do this. And now that could be your book, like what you're talking about in your next book, what salespeople want from SEs.
Yes.
They want them to be mini salespeople.
Yes.
Right. But SEs don't want, like, if they wanted to be mini salespeople, they would have been salespeople. Right. So, yeah. Go ahead.
So if we flip back in, I know we've done the people part before, but I'll just touch on the fact that because you just brought something up that's an ongoing potential issue between sales and pre-sales. And that is what style an SE has. So when I talk about people, it's not exclusive, but I focus on social styles, which is similar to DISC or Myers-Briggs. It's that idea, right?
Yep.
One of the things that causes difficulty or stress is when you are not what somebody else expects you to be. So if the salesperson expects you to be all creative and lively and bouncing around, and that would be what I would call an expressive style, but in fact, you're process driven, you're more inclined to give statistical information than funny stories, you can be just as successful. I had one, I actually think I mentioned it in the book as well. I had one sales director come to me and say, we can't use John in this customer conference. He's going to be doing 4 or 5 little demos, and I just don't like his style. He's just too dull. We need something way more dynamic than he is. So I said, just watch and learn. So I didn't change it. But I said, but seriously, go to some of his demos. So he went to some of the demos because I thought really highly of the guy. At the end of it, John had more return people coming back and saying, I want to see that product. I saw a little bit about it in his demos. I now want to see more of it. And his sales were higher. The sales of the product he represented there were higher than anybody else's. He was quiet. He was low key, and he gave off such a feeling of confidence to the people. He wasn't a lot of fun. He wasn't dynamic. He did not speak fast. that was what that salesperson thought you needed to be. Now, to give the director of sales credit, at the end of it, he said, okay, I see what you mean. And off we went and we were fine. But if you are the diametric opposite of what someone expects you to be, like the opposite could be, if I expect you when you're doing a demo to only give statistical information, only show what the product does, only do drop-down boxes, be serious, be focused, and you want to tell a story or two, sales rep won't like that either.
Yeah. The funny thing about that is it doesn't matter what the sales rep or the SE want. In the end, it's what the customer wants. And right, like the SE, if the SE likes to tell stories and the customer doesn't care about that, then the SE has to adjust as well.
Well, that's another big part of it. Read your audience. And that's really what I call it is, this is where read the room comes from. People will say we need to read the room. Well, in order to do that, you need to read the people in it.
Yeah.
And that's what it's about. But different styles will be just fine. So if you've got a really the other one is speed. The pace of how you're doing the demo. I sat in a demo. I was the manager, and I used to watch, but I wouldn't often interfere. But we got to a point where one of the key people in the audience asked a question. The answer was no. I knew that. You know how everybody hates to say no in the sales cycle? Well, the SE, who was really good at it, was just going around in circles trying to explain all these other great things to avoid saying no.
Yeah. And
sitting in the audience, I could see how annoyed that prospect was. So then I interrupted and said, excuse me, Mr. Prospect, I don't usually interrupt, but I want to just say the answer that Chris is getting to is no. But what she's also doing is explaining the reasons why we truly believe you're not going to care about that no, because you're going to see that we can do what you need. And he said, okay, that's fine, but not exactly what I asked. No, not exactly what you asked. He said, it's fine, go ahead. But he was getting so annoyed because he was fast-paced, he was direct, he wanted a yes or no. And she believed that you should go slowly and you should walk around this hard answer. For a lot of people, that's the way you should go.
So, speaking of reading the room, it got a lot harder recently with COVID and going online and people not turning on the camera.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts around that? Like, how can people still read the room, the virtual room?
Because I think you can still read the room. I had an audience and there was, you can see things like they won't show their face. You'll know what kind they are. They're conservative. They're indirect. And that will impact how you talk to them. When you hear their pace, how fast they speak, when you see how dynamic they are. I lean forward, like I keep leaning forward towards this. The opposite type of person will sit back. And if I'm in an audience and the person is sitting back, I slow myself down. I'm a fast talker. I lean forward. And when I can see that you're like that, I don't with you, but I would slow down. And when you learn how to do it, you can be talking to a person on the left side of the screen and you're going to do this and you're going to move your hands and then when you go to answer the other question, I'll take a deep breath and slow down. Might help that I work with horses a lot because you have to do that with horses too.
Right. Yeah. I never thought about it this way. For me, whenever someone turns off the camera, I just feel that they're not engaged. And how do you
not be.
And how do you get them engaged is to ask them questions that are not yes or no questions. Questions about them. Go ahead.
Yeah, I also think in advance, you should work with whoever is the leader on their side and ask them to make it a rule that they have to have their camera on. It's really hard for us to do it as we're right in front of them. It somehow makes us seem pushy or bossy sometimes, but I will ask ahead of time. And before any cameras come on, I will start saying, we need everybody to have their camera on. If you wait until some people haven't done it, they know you're targeting them and they don't like it.
Right. Well, yeah, for me, I've noticed that either none of them turn it on, or as soon as one person turns it on, the majority turn it on. And
Yeah.
so I don't work with with like the leaders on their end. But what I do is I say, I'm just gonna turn on my camera for a few minutes to scare you. And then I turn on my camera, it's like boo, right? They laugh, and that will be the end of it. Sometimes they turn on their camera to scare me as well, and sometimes they don't. But I find when I start asking those questions, like I never thought about like someone's leaning back, someone's leaning forward, or the camera's off or on. Just when I ask questions, the way they answer, for me, just that's how I understand what's in the room and who answers. Who's like, if I ask a general question, who's jumping in to answer first? Okay, that's the person who's gonna be doing more. Yeah. So, but it's I never thought about it this way, so I'm gonna have to go read your book, which I'll have to do.
So the third part of the book is resilience. So we talk about what do we do when we're dealing with the people and they're not on, and it still doesn't go well. You did a brilliant demo and it didn't go well. When you get in trouble because you're overusing a style or a strength or whatever, but basically not getting along with a salesperson or the demo goes poorly, how do you bounce back? They don't think anybody helps anybody else enough with that. There are some really basic techniques to help you bounce back when things aren't great. And I actually have a list of exercises that I include in there, like they're very specific and you can just go and do them. Some of them are lengthy, some of them are really quick. One exercise that people love is what went well, which is sometimes called the 3 blessings. I think that's where it started, but so not having a religious bent to it, it's not blessings in my mind, it's what went well. And I will get people for 5 days in a row, and I'll make them send it to me in email. And if I don't get the email, I contact them and say, what went well? And so they do, because you have to get into a habit, right? So what went well means pick out 3 things today. What went well? So, my audience was engaged. The other part would be, what did I do to contribute to it? And I don't care if you even come up with, I was just lucky. Okay, well, what you did was you were in the right place at the right time. Good for you.
You're prepared to be lucky.
What can I do to get more of that? And that's the part you have to really think about, the fact that it went well. I had something to do with it. I can proactively help myself get more of this. That demo went as well as it did because I did research ahead of time that I don't normally do, because I used a prop. I've never used a prop before and everybody loved it. Whatever it might be. What can I do to get more of it? And people have told me that simple thing has totally settled them down and made them feel more positive about themselves or a situation.
So here's the question. Like, speaking of demos, a lot of people walk out of demos thinking that they did amazing, but turns out they didn't. They bombed and they lost. In order for someone to have resilience about something that went bad, they kind of have to be self-aware. How does one actually get that? Like, how do I know that things went badly in order to use my resilience? Otherwise, I won't be able to, like, I'll just continue through life.
Well, that's a good question. I'm not entirely sure I know an answer to that. You should know that things went poorly. So maybe you don't know the minute they left the room, Ringsy, but aren't you going to know later if the sales rep is saying that deal is not going well, if it fails, if you finally get some bad feedback?
Salesperson didn't close it. Right, that's what
well, then, you're going to say that's right. So, you would have to first know that there was a problem to start bouncing back. And part of that is self-awareness, which is what you just said. Yeah. But there are people who think that every demo goes well. And I don't think resilience techniques are needed there. I think some management intervention and some self-awareness is needed there.
Okay.
For instance, if you have no idea that demo went poorly, maybe you need to do a debrief after each one. So I wouldn't say I actually don't think that's a resilience technique. You have to know before you have to know you're frustrated or stressed before you can start dealing with it.
So, yeah, actually, there's one situation that I've seen with multiple people who talk to me where they think they're doing well. and they just have a new SE manager or whatever happens, and then they receive feedback from the SE manager that they're doing horribly, but without any indication of why that is.
Oh,
How would you handle that as an individual? Because I didn't talk to the managers. If I was a manager, I'd tell them like, hey, provide examples at least. But as an individual, how would you approach that specific situation?
so pass it by me again. So somebody has said, you thought you were doing, this person thought they were doing really great.
Yeah.
And then out of the blue got feedback saying that they weren't.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, from a new manager. They changed the SE manager. Previous SE manager said, you guys are doing good, didn't provide feedback. And then all of a sudden they get feedback from a new SE manager, but they don't provide any concrete examples. They just say, I heard these things about you, or you're not doing well.
Yeah. So if you were coming to me about that, it's not like a 1 or 2 sentence answer. I would need to know something about that manager. And I'll tell you, if it's a new manager, they're probably stressed about something. And if they are stressed, what's their style? Sounds like to me, he's expressive. And what he does when he's stressed is he attacks.
So he received feedback from sales that the SE is not doing well.
Oh, okay. So it was sales that wasn't happy with them. So I think you're not, I don't think you're talking about resilience and handling stress. I think you're talking about somebody who needs to be managed better.
Well, I find that part of resilience is to be able to get your manager to, like, you just received bad news about yourself. How do you handle it?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, yeah. And in there, I have a number of different techniques. And so a big one, and I would follow this one. So it is bad news. I thought I was doing great. The adversity, it's the ABC method. A is adversity. The adversity is, I just found out that I'm not doing as well as I thought. I just got bad feedback. The consequences, that's the C. The consequences are my mind is churning. I am unable to prep the next demo. I'm cranky at home. I can't even eat. So all kinds of whatever it is, those are the consequences of it. Here's the thing. What makes a difference on those consequences is the B, and that's belief. That is your belief about what happened, about the adversity. So I tell you, this is not something that we learn in half an hour, but let me just barrel through it. And it's in the book. It would take a little longer than this. So at this point, you have to determine if your belief is correct. I mean, sometimes it's bad news and you just better go and apologize and see if you can fix it. But what is your belief? And your belief probably is either personal, permanent, or pervasive. So permanent. Oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. I'll be fired tomorrow. This is terrible. Pervasive. Oh, I'm no good at anything. Why can't I, a simple demo, why can't I do anything? It's pervasive. And then personal would be, I'm the worst one that ever existed. Nobody else ever gets bad feedback. This is all about me. Once you know which one and everybody does those three, Ramsey, once you figure out which one, you deal with it. So I'm extremely stressed because I'm pretty sure I'm going to be fired tomorrow because I got negative feedback from a salesperson. Once you know what that is, then you have to go, and I'll tell you, this is not going to happen in a half hour. I'm just barreling through this. Yep. Then you go into disputing it. But You're disputing is your belief or handling your beliefs. If it's really bad, one of the first things that I like people to go to is the implications. What if it's right? What are the implications? Your belief is correct. You're going to be fired. Deal with the implications, otherwise known as what's the worst that could happen. Once you do that, you can stop the churning. What happens, Ramsey, is everybody's churning. So that's what we're trying to get rid of and get some clarity. Yeah. So if it's a really bad one, I say start with implications. Yeah. But maybe you're wrong. Maybe maybe this person had good feedback in the past or whatever. Or you're just taking it too personally, or it was one bad demo. It doesn't mean every single thing you do is bad. So then you look at so I'll tell you what they are. What's the evidence?
Yeah,
Like, how many bad
there was
demos
none.
did I do?
That's the problem.
Hmm?
By the way, what you were saying earlier reminds me a lot of Tim Ferriss's fear setting. It's kind of like goal setting, but fear settings. Like, what's the worst that could
Yeah.
happen in this situation?
Yes.
So yeah,
But sometimes fear setting is a great thing to do. So,
I love it.
so what's the evidence? And remember, not everything turns out okay, but most of the time it does. So the evidence would be things like, the last sales manager liked me. There's actually a new SE, our new AE, and maybe he needs something different. What I should do is go right to him and say, I understand you didn't like that last demo. John Smith liked it. Let's talk about what you'd prefer to see. Something like that. So that's what can I do? One of my favorites is alternates. These are all in this one technique. So alternates really could be seen as reframing. So you're trying to change your churning mind to start, right? That's what you're trying to do here first. That's what stress is, causes you to churn and your stomach is sore and all that kind of stuff. And you can't deal with this until you get rid of that. So alternates mean look at it a different way. So put a different sentence on it. And if it's your situation where this this new pre-sales new guy told me that the sales team doesn't like the way I do demos. Oh my God, they hate my demos. You can change that to something like, I see I have some areas to fix. I've fixed things before. I'll fix this one too. And you have to deliberately make yourself say them, write them down if needed, even though you don't believe them in the moment. Because you won't, because your mind is churning and you're on this really negative thing. So work out the evidence. You can work out alternates. You should deal with the implications. How bad is it and what will happen if this bad thing does happen? And by the time you work through those things, and the other one, well, sometimes you want to just distance yourself. You're all upset. So distance is one. Distance can be just walking out of the room. It can be going outside for a while. It can be taking a vacation. For some people, that's not a bad idea. But generally speaking, we look at alternates, we look at evidence, we look at what are the implications, and then we look at what's good about this stress. I hate hearing that I didn't do good demos. I hate this new guy. I never heard that before, when in fact, the real thing is, thank God I found out. I thought I was doing, so that's a little bit alternates, but it's also understanding that some stress can be good. I hate this stress. If I hadn't known that this was happening, I would just be barreling through until it was too late. So now I know that I should sit back, and then you can think about what should I do. And then if you were coming to me for coaching, I would say, let's talk about what that person is like. How should you approach them? Should you approach them? And we'd go from there. So that's why I wrote the book, is because those things that you're bringing up happen all the time.
Yes, they do.
And until you get your mind not churning, you can't deal with them. And in order to deal with them, you have to know something about yourself and the other people. You have to know something about what strengths you can use and what strengths they have. And it's not easy to get rid of stress.
So, you know what I love about your answer? When I asked the question, I was expecting something to the effect of, oh, go tell the manager this and work through that and whatever. But you didn't even talk about that yet, because you wanted to know more about the manager. You did provide a very good answer, or a very lengthy answer, all about how you can handle it personally and basically process it personally.
Yes.
Before you even saw, like, I don't think many people talk about that. Like how to understand things. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm saying that's why it's a secret.
Yeah, I get that.
Who said it's obvious?
This one's not obvious.
What you're noticing. No, it's not obvious. It should be, but it's not. I think what you were just saying there is what I find all the time, which is, as long as our minds are churning, we cannot have clarity on a situation, and without clarity, we cannot address it. So I always take people through these first steps. Let's unchurn your mind to start.
Yeah.
Let's understand yourself and the people that you're dealing with. And then let's sit back and see, can this be fixed and how should you go about it?
I like that.
It's a multi-step process. So when people come to me for coaching, I make them sign up for 6 sessions.
Okay.
6. I was saying 6, but I meant 6. Because like if you think that you're going to come to one session and fix a real problem, unlikely, very unlikely. And I find that when people come to coaching, sometimes we're on the 3rd session before they either recognize or admit what the problem is.
Yep. It takes a few
And
chats.
sometimes it's recognized.
Well, sometimes they like, I know this with my wife, for example. She says something to me and my immediate response is, no way, no, I didn't say that, I didn't do that, no way. And then it takes me like a day or two to kind of internalize what she said. And I talk to my wife every day. Now, if you're an SE and you've been running into some issues throughout your career, let's say you're an new SE, you've been on the job for a year, and over this entire year you've been running into issues. If I talk to you once, Aileen, I'm probably not going to be open to, like, I'm not even going to be open to telling you everything, right? I'm
That's
guarded.
right.
We didn't build that relationship yet. I don't trust you enough. I trust you,
Yeah.
but by the 3rd session, now I'm thinking back about what you told me in the first one, or now it's clicking. I remember from university, there was a course called digital communication. It took me half a semester of failing until it clicked. And once it clicked, A+ for the rest of the year, but it took me half a year. And so it's
no, that's exactly right. So you just said something interesting about yourself too, that I'd like to comment on.
Yes, please.
So earlier when I was talking about leaning forward and pulling back and stuff, you said, yeah, back is me, you, meaning that that's you.
Yeah, I waved.
And then a few minutes ago, you told me that, I'm going to ask you this, that when your wife says something, you'll go away and mull it over. There is absolutely no doubt that you are on the left side of that social styles grid. You are slow-paced in getting to your decision. That does not mean slow. That does not mean that you can't make a fast decision. It means you like to mull it over.
So, well, I think I have both, because I'm very fast-paced in making decisions on certain things. But if someone kind of contradicts what I'm saying, it takes me, I will never admit it it takes me a while to see their point of view. Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But once you know that about yourself, or even better, so then you'll know this is what I'm doing. But when you recognize it in somebody else, you will give them a chance to think it over. You will not be offended that they said, fine, I'm just going to go away. Because maybe in a day, it will be okay.
Yeah.
For people like you, if it's a stressful situation, that's a time when I will give them a hint in writing that there's an issue, because they need a few minutes to be on their own and process it. So if I were a salesperson and I wanted to say to you, I don't like your demo. You're not going to take it well. I know that. So you have to be nice about this. So I can be nice and say, Ramsey, we're going to have a conversation. I'm sure we'll work this out, but I have some issues with Tuesday's demo. I would give that to you in writing so that you have privacy to mull it over. But I would schedule the call when we're going to talk in person.
So can I ask you this? Can people be different in personal life than their professional life? Like, because with my wife, I always argue, but I've received feedback, like harsh feedback on the spot. And I took it very differently than when my wife tells me something.
Well, it's because you're more comfortable at home. You're still the same person, but every person has a whole lot of facets to them, right? So if something really stressful came up at home, like that new, and don't feel you can deal with it, you're going to go back to the way you do it at work or something. But our comfort zones make a difference to us, and you're comfortable at home. We are.
Well, it seems like I'm more comfortable at work based on what you're saying.
Oh, okay.
At work, I take it better than at home. That's the difference.
Yeah. Okay. No, that could be true. And also, it depends too. Your wife has a style.
Yes, she does.
And you can be married to somebody who's the diametric opposite.
She probably is.
Still, that can be a really symbiotic thing. Oh, it's great. I like to be laid back. You like to be outgoing. We'll work
Yeah,
that out.
no, we're the total opposites. And
Yeah. And
if it
so
wasn't
that's
for
why there
that,
will be.
if she was like me, we'd never see anybody. And if I was like her, we'd never come home.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So I'm going to guess that you two are diametric opposites.
yeah.
But loving, respectful diametric opposites. So most of the time, that's really just complementary, but it will cause stress. When there's stress, it'll be caused by that, and you'll separate a little bit.
Yeah, but the good thing about that stress is it pushes us forward.
Yeah. A lot of stress is good. That's why in the ABC method, part of it is this stress good?
Yeah. Well, I think, well, it's like working out. When you work out, you go put stress on your body so that your body can get better. If your life is stress-free, you're never going to push yourself to be anything better than what you are today, because you have no pushers or stressors.
So just before I published the book, I gave it to a friend to read over to find out if she'd be able to give an early review. And what she did was give me detailed criticism. And I was thinking, do you have no clue what you're supposed to be doing here? I don't appreciate that. And that's how I felt. And I was just kind of stomping around in my mind. And fortunately, I do follow a lot of what's in the book. And one of the first things I did was stop and think about, is this useful? I'm very stressed. Is this true? And the reason I did, because I was sitting down and I was banging away, and I had made a couple of changes, and I thought, sometimes stress is good. She was right. And I made some changes because sometimes stress is good.
I'm curious, like, do you think it was hard for her to provide criticism, or was it easy?
It was easy for her. Matter of fact, she thought it was her job.
Well, some people reach out to me and say, hey, Ramsey, can you look at this and let me know what you think? And even though they asked me to let them know what they think, it's like, all right, now I have to walk on eggshells and say it in a way that's not insulting, that will get them to see my point of view. But some people just blurt it, like my wife. She just tells me exactly what she thinks. And it's painful. But,
It absolutely can be painful. I do that. I'm too direct. And I have learned to back off a little bit and to put 3 or 4 sentences in front of things that I would normally just say the answer. You can learn to modify your style. No, she definitely meant, and I mentioned to another friend, well, I gave this to Mary to have a look at, my friend said, and she told me all kinds of things I should change. And the second friend said, what matters? She was supposed to do that. But it was useful. It truly was very useful.
Yeah. And I could tell my wife is putting in effort in terms of like how to address me, because now whenever she wants to tell me something, I could see her struggling to come up with some compliments. We've had times like, just skip to the point. And we kind of
it's because she's direct and you're indirect. So I used to report to this man who was we weren't diametric opposites. We got along great, but he was on the indirect slow side, and I'm on the too direct, too fast style.
Yeah.
And when we would talk, we would normally agree, but getting to the agreement was annoying. So one day I said to him, look, why don't we make a deal? I promise that I will never answer with only one word. I absolutely promise that I will provide at least a sentence to every single thing, every single response I give. If you promise that you will stop giving 17 sentences when a word is enough. And he said, actually, that's not a bad deal. Okay, you talk more, I'll talk less. And it was fine. It worked out fine.
I've always thought of myself as direct, but now that you're saying it, I'm indirect. Well, I'm both. I don't like to tell people what they're doing right or wrong. I like to ask them so they can realize what they're doing right or wrong. I always find that useful to them. And based on the way you're talking, that is very indirect. And yet in my mind, it's like I'm as direct as I can be to get them to see what they're doing wrong.
Yeah. And what you do is you put precursors onto the point you're making. You'll lead into something. You'll like, remember I mentioned that demo where the guy just wanted to know yes or no, and the SE was going around in circles because she really felt that was the right way to do it. He's not going to want to hear me say no. He wanted to hear you say no. I would want to hear the no.
Yeah.
Then I will listen to what you want to tell me, but otherwise they can't. Yeah, you said an interesting thing. You said that you don't like to tell. If you look at the grid that I use for this style, you're on the indirect side. It's called indirect. It's also called the ask side, because on the direct side, people are more likely to tell.
No.
You don't want to, you may not ask, but you'll put 3 or 4 sentences in front of what you want to say. Those of us who are too far to the other side will not put enough sentences on it.
No,
So-
I definitely ask. I don't.
Yeah.
I ask what I want to ask. I don't try to. I don't state. I don't.
Yeah, and everything,
Yeah.
everything, that's right. And that's just a different style.
Yeah.
And when you know those things about people, so say that demo I talked about. When the SE was talking to that one person, she should have modified her style and done, no, we don't do that. I'd like to show you why we can still help you. And he would say, yes. Somebody else would not be able to get past the no. And the trick is to recognize them.
Well, yeah, my style would have been, why are you asking specifically about this piece? How is that going to help you? And then they would state, and like basically I try to get to a qualified no. But I would,
Well, that's what she was doing.
okay.
But the answer was a no to his precise question. It was no, we don't do that. And she could say, no, but we can do better. I used to occasionally say, no, but I can do better. Do you want to hear the better?
Right.
And they're okay with that. But some people just do not want you to be direct. It's tricky. So that's why these things are secret. They're sort of secrets. They're sort of maybe too much work for people to bring out into the open. You have to work at them.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty good. I like it. I'm looking forward to getting your book when it's out, Aileen. Is it out?
It is out.
Okay.
Did you not get a free copy?
No, I got the excerpt.
You got an excerpt.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the free copies are done. However,
No,
Not
I don't.
to
I don't
worry.
need a freak. I want to support.
not to worry. It's not that expensive.
You can do better.
That's right.
Yeah. All right. Well, Aileen, it's time to move on to the not so firearm. These are the same 4 questions I ask almost every guest. I have to change them every once in a while. For example, I have to change the first question because you already answered it about what is
Okay.
your super strength, if what it would be your superpower. So I guess my question for today is, what is your kryptonite? What is your weakness if you were to identify it?
Oh, impatience is my weakness. Impatience. And that's more serious than it sounds, because what it causes me to do is forget everything I know and to go way too fast towards something. So if I'm mad at you, I'll snap.
Yeah.
When I'm not always, but you know. Or like with that boss that I made, that manager that I made the deal with, you say fewer words, I'll say more. I actually almost stomped out of his office one day because he said something that really annoyed me, and I don't have any patience for this. I think he would have fired me on the spot if I had made it out. My kryptonite is I am impatient.
Okay. How do you handle that? How do you overcome that?
I have been working on it forever. I've
You
been
work with
working on it
horses.
forever. What I do is I deliberately, even when I'm dealing with somebody who would be okay with single words, I actually almost always remind myself to do some precursors to say more words, not to talk more, but to say a few more words. I know I say lots of words, so that may not make sense. But when the answer is yes or no, I don't like that, go away. I practice. All you can do is practice. I practice that. That's not how I should say it.
Yeah. I'm
Take your
also
time.
impatient, and I also try to answer with yes or no, like, as much as possible.
Yeah, we're on the opposite ends of that. Yeah.
Well, yeah, yeah, that's something I have to work on. Like, I'm very impatient, and I am usually the kind of guy who, if you ask me a question, like I remember I did like an organizational behavior course at university, and during the exams, everybody was writing like pages of answers, and I wrote one paragraph.
Yeah.
And I got the highest mark in the class. I think the teacher appreciated the fact that I didn't write so much. So
Being succinct is a good thing. One other thing on the how do I handle it? Sometimes I warn other people. So I can remember one case, this happened many times, but I was managing a group of people, and 6 of them were they were all over the country, but 6 of them were in the same office as I was. And I walked by them every day to get to my office. And in one of our early meetings, I said to them, when I am stressed or really focused on something, I will go barreling by. I always say hi, but it might be abrupt. And if you ask me something, I'll say yes or no with no extras on it. It just means I'm having a day. It doesn't mean anything about us. They were fine with that.
yeah, I noticed you like I interviewed a gentleman last week. His name is Nate Broom, and he talked about his weaknesses as well. And he's a senior VP of sales, and he mentioned that when he got when he first got promoted, he told people, his employees, his subordinates, his managers, these are my weaknesses, and I need your help with them. And
similar, yeah.
That seems to like people appreciate that. Right?
Actually, in my personal life, I just recently was talking to 2 friends, like sort of a best friend, but somebody else who's around a lot now but didn't used to be. I find myself giving him warnings. Like, for instance, I ask a lot of questions. Indirect people don't like being asked questions. They think you're being challenged sometimes. Yeah. And I had some questions for him, and I would say, I just want to remind you who you're talking to here. I just ask questions. I truly have no judgment here, so blah, blah. So sometimes I give people warning of who I am, what they're dealing with.
Yeah, I've faced that. It's like, and you have to say like, hey, I'm not asking you questions to judge you. I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah. People don't like questions sometimes.
Yeah, in my mind, I don't understand. Like, it took me a while. Well, I don't have to understand it, but it took me a while to accept it, I guess. Like,
to understand that it exists, that people are bothered by it.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Question number 3. Other than your book, which is called
3 Secrets of Sales Engineering Success.
I have it in front of me. Tech isn't enough. I love the fact that you said tech isn't enough.
Yeah.
Because, sales engineering, it's tech. Other than your book that people can find on Amazon, there will be a link in the show notes. Is there any other book you would recommend for people who want to understand the human behavior?
I'll tell you what I would recommend are 2 websites or 2 areas, really. Okay. I would suggest going to the VIA character. Actually, you know what? I would recommend anything written by Martin Seligman, Seligman. He's one of the founders of the VIA Strengths. He talks about the ABC method. He's really good.
Okay.
He has a book called Flourish that would help anybody, I think.
Flourish. Okay. Write that down. I don't remember if that's the same book you mentioned last time.
Well, it could be, because it is one of my favorites. But the other thing I would do is look at anything by, God, I can't remember his first name, but his last name is Niemiec, Niemiec. And he writes books about using your strengths. And he has, I think, it's called The Blueprint or something. And it's all about using your strengths at work. Or part of it's about using your strengths at work. And he talks about overusing your strengths. Ryan Niemiec. So I would recommend his. I'm pretty sure I did not recommend that one the last time.
No, I don't recall this one. VIA. So yeah, he's viacharacter.org.
Yeah.
He's on.
And what's he blue? I'm going to look it up. There's one called Blueprints. Are you looking at his things there?
I'm at the VIA institution on character.
Well, I'm just going to look because he wrote a book that I often get my clients to look at. Let me see if I can find it without taking. There it is. The Power of Character Strengths. In that book, he will talk about over and underusing your strengths. And he will specifically talk about using them at work sometimes.
Okay. All right. So last question of the not so fire on Aileen. Is there a habit you're working on today to improve in your personal or professional life? One word answers are okay. Just I want to let you know that.
Yeah, procrastination at the moment.
It is difficult. How are you handling that? How are you trying to wait? Are you trying to work on procrastination or to stop procrastinating?
No, I don't want to procrastinate more. I would like to procrastinate less. I am working on it with, another book that you might know is Atomic Habits.
Yep.
So I'm following some of what he does in there. And for the most part, it's setting up cues. So I have set up cues that I always like to have 2 cups of coffee in the morning. So I get up, I have my first cup of coffee. I can do nothing if I want to. I can play games if I want to. And at the end of that, before my second cup starts, I go and I will work on the next book that I'm working on for a certain period of time. So I have cues to myself and I must go. So you have to make them up. I mean, it has to be specific. After my first cup of coffee, I sit at my computer and I work on my book for 45 minutes or more.
Nice. That's pretty good. All right. Aileen, was there a question you were hoping I was going to ask you, but I did not?
No, I think you're always brilliant and you ask all the right questions.
I appreciate that. I'm going to put that in my resume.
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time, Aileen, and I look forward to
thank you.
more books.
It's always fun.
Likewise. And that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you, Aileen, for coming on. Thank you for listening. I say that almost every week. I really appreciate you listening, actually. I hope you took something out of it. What have you taken out of it? What are your strengths? If you were to talk about the 5 strengths that you have, if you do take the test, the VIA test, which again, I'll try to find it and leave a link in the show notes. I'm curious what the results are. If you'd like to share that with me, either through LinkedIn, through wherever, I'm happy to hear it. On Twitter, I am on Twitter @WeSEs. So check that out. But with that, I really don't have much more to say. I think this was a great show as far as I'm concerned. I hope you enjoyed it. And with that, I'm signing off.